People who've had sleep with their ex, or friend's parent. How did you get to that point? What happened after? A friend at school's mom was pretty hot. She was relatively young compared to most of our moms, and his dad was quite a bit older and absolutely minted. When we were young teenagers, it was a bit of a running joke to give him shit about his hot mom or how his dad was her sugar daddy. Fast forward to the end of high school, when we were all 18 and he was having a party at his massive house to celebrate. Most people were outside getting drunk in the garden, but I'd had a bad few months, family stuff, so wasn't really feeling it. I decided to go and chill inside for a bit, and in the kitchen I found his mom just drinking wine and looking forlornly out the window. I asked if she was okay, and she pretty much unloaded her issues. She was miserable. She hated his dad. She'd settled down without having a life first, felt trapped because she couldn't afford to leave, loved her kids, etc. I opened up about my issues too with my family, and it actually felt good to talk to a relative stranger about it. I now realize I should have been seeing a therapist. Anyway, one thing led to another, and she started making out with me. I didn't stop her. She then led me upstairs, and the rest is history. On the one hand, it was pretty awesome. She was smoking hot. I was pretty inexperienced, and she really knew how to communicate in the bedroom. On the other hand, though, I knew I was betraying my friend and destroying his parents' marriage. Plus, I could hear all my friends laughing and partying outside. A few months later, they got divorced, and I understand she got a bit shafted in the deal because she'd cheated on him. I don't know if that was me, or she did it with someone else too. I am pretty ashamed about it, but I also realize she was using me too. I was never under any illusion we had some special connection or anything, but I can see she just wanted to bang someone out of catharsis or frustration and maybe, subconsciously, to force the problems in the marriage into the daylight so she could finally get out. Story 2. So me and my best mate were tight. Spent a lot of time drinking and just shooting the shit at his mom's place as 18 years olds. One night we were having common banter and I said, "Ian, one day I'm gonna bang your mom." Hoping for a rise. Dead-faced, he yells out, "Mum, come here." Out she trots. He goes, "Paco said he wants to sleep with you." Hoping to put me on the spot. I just laughed and scoffed. She just went bright red and giggled, knowing how crude we were, and turned around and walked back inside. No shit. 10 minutes later, she comes back out to the balcony, wearing a silk dressing gown with a glass of champagne in her hand, grabbed me by the hand and took me to her room. I won't give you those details, but regardless to say, we sleep together. During this, my best mate's older brother actually walked in on us. He wasn't home at the time of the initiation, but must have returned home mid-act. I don't actually recall his expression, but I'm sure it was horror, because by the time we finished, he had left the house again. I returned to the balcony and just high-fived my best mate. We actually never really spoke about it much after that. It didn't have any impact on our friendship. His brother, however, had some serious hang-ups for years after, to the point that every time he got drunk, he would just get dark and brooding and kind of depressed over it. Years and years later, me and the older brother reconnected. He never mentioned it. Needless to say, my nickname for a while was simply Mother. Story 3. I sucked my best friend's dad. Me and my friend, B, had been preparing to go away on holiday, to work. We were at her dad's house whilst we had been packing/preparing. B and her stepmom needed some kind of suntan lotion, not too sure, and other bits, so stated they would go to the shops whilst I stayed back to finish off and hang out. I am a guy. Me and B's dad were just chatting and joking, all aware I am gayish, playing on his pool table/sharing a beer. He started giving me a jokey chat about looking after B as she hadn't been away by herself. We were maybe 17 at the time. B's dad was semi-famous for two things. Supposedly how he would go down on big birds for hours, that's Brit slang for larger ladies, and his massive dick. B's dad and I were sat down in his conservatory. I was sat on the sofa and he was sat across from me. He had been wearing these short shorts, and at the angle I was at I could see his dick popping out. I evidently had made it obvious, and he starts jokingly telling me to stop staring. I try to laugh it off. Fine embarrassment when really my mouth is starting to water. I started asking how big it actually is and if it was hard, etc. He was laughing and saying no. It was very jokey, laddie, at this point. He then started teasing me if I wanted to see it. After a back and forth, he pulled his short shorts down really quickly and then back up. After that, I was enthralled. It still remains the biggest dick I've seen. The next part is fairly embarrassing and awkward, but effectively I kept asking him if I could see it again as I was shocked. Then I asked if I could touch it, which he said everyone always does. Then it got somewhat intimate as my lips were around his head. The rest of that would be a trade secret. The worst part came about 18 months later when we all met up for a lunch. He kept teasing me about stuff in front of B and boyfriend, her mom, his then wife and other family about me being camp and my weight, etc. I remember feeling like I could be a total cunt and out the secret, but I loved the rest of the family too much. He was fairly masculine and played on being a man's man. That wasn't ever the case. But at the lunch he had got a new ear piercing and the older family had been teasing him about bung soft. Towards the end of the lunch I got a bit of confidence and responded to one of his jibes by making a comment about his earring making him look like George Michael and would he prefer it if my mouth was full. Safe to say he was very quiet. Besides me and him, nobody knows. Story 4. I was at a friend's birthday party. My friend was in her mid-20s. I was 30. Her mom was in her early 50s. She and her mom took really good care of me after my father passed. They made sure I was eating and that I actually left the apartment every day, as I was prone to just sit around being a depressed sad sack. Friend's mom and I used to get stoned together. So when we were at her daughter's birthday party at her mom's house, she called me to her room so we could smoke a joint. She didn't want to do it in front of everyone, and it definitely wasn't the first time we'd gotten a little high together. So it was somewhat familiar territory. Maybe it was the weed, or the wine, or both, but as we're smoking and chatting, I just leaned in and kissed her. To my surprise, she kissed me back, and we proceeded to make out like a couple of horny teenagers on the love seat in her bedroom. She stopped for a moment, looked at me and said, "Well, had I known you were interested, we could have done this a long time ago." We made out a little more, and I told her that we should stop because we're going to get caught. So we kissed and groped one another a little more and returned to the party. The next day she stopped by my apartment to see how I was doing, which wasn't uncommon. That day was slightly different. She was always a very good-looking woman, but that day she had more carefully applied makeup, some nice-looking earrings, and a blouse that showed off more cleavage than usual. I invited her in, and we were off to the races. We both had a great time, but I thought of my friend and said that we probably shouldn't do this again. She didn't really respond to it, and we continued to cuddle for a while. The next day she called me and said that she thought she may have lost her earring on my bed or my couch, which I thought was BS, but it turns out that the earring was indeed in between the cushions of my couch. She came over to retrieve it, and we went at it again, and again, and again. This went on for months until I finally was moving out of state. It never happened again. We never spoke of it, and my friend never found out. Sadly, my friend's mom passed 5 years ago. I thought about telling her, but it just seemed like a bad idea. Story 5. In high school, there was a popular cheerleader's mom who legitimately went out of her way to sleep with a lot of kids in high school. I was friends with her and talked every now and then, as I was a football player. The mom went around and messaged me and a few of my friends, cutting straight to the chase that she wanted to have sex. I remember being excited at the time, just because in high school you had to out in so much effort to have sex, I felt like. And this grown woman was just throwing it at me. She also scared me a bit because she was offering to eat my ass, and at the age I had no desire in doing it all. Anyways, one day I found a ride to her house and we did the deed. Amazing sex, and the same was echoed with a few of my friends. The unfortunate part is that this woman was married with 2 other kids, and all of this got out. I couldn't imagine the embarrassment for the cheerleader. Never talked to her personally about it, mainly because I was one of the kids that did it. Also felt bad for her husband. He continued trying to save the marriage. Poor guy. I still have a message on my Facebook telling me that if her husband ever messages me, to just ignore it, and that he was trying to save his marriage for his kids. Story 6. My ex-best friend slept with my dad. My parents have always been very chill and lenient, and they allowed my friends to come over and drink while they monitored how much we have, which was a much better idea than us drinking in the fields like we used to before my parents found out. As we got a little older, we started to actually drink and chill out with my parents in the living room, rather than just in my room. Bestie and both my parents got on really well. They were friends on Facebook, and both Mom and Dad started to like or comment on Bestie's posts. Eventually, for one reason or another, Bestie messaged my dad directly, and they started chatting, which turned into flirting. I saw the messages, and I told her if she doesn't stop, we're no longer going to be friends, and she was acting all apologetic, saying she didn't realize how bad it sounded. She called him daddy in the messages, and she never hid that she had a daddy kink. I decided to give her another chance. We both went to uni, in different cities, but she shown that she was really sorry about what happened, and we stayed very close friends. So second year of uni, we both came home for Christmas. She spent Christmas Eve at mine. My mom got an emergency phone call from auntie who was in labor, so mom left to support her. We are foreigners and my auntie didn't speak English too well at the time, but mom did. So mom left and was out the entire night. My brother was at his girlfriend's. Me, Bestie, and Dad chilled out for a little, and then we all went to sleep. Me and Bestie slept on the sofa. Dad went up to his bedroom. I woke up in the middle of the night. Bestie wasn't there, but all her things were. I was confused until I heard the bed squeaking, and I walked in on them going at it. I threw her out in the middle of the night. She had no way of getting home, and she just stayed outside our door crying and banging on the door to let her in. I didn't care, it was middle of winter. Dad wanted to drive her home. I told him to forget it. He's not going anywhere with her. She got her own dad to pick her up next morning, before my mom got back home. What follows is a massive shit show between my mom and my dad, but that's a whole other story. I haven't spoken to her since. Story 7. Mine is one I'm not very proud of. This happened during spring break of 2000. My high school was out for 1 week for spring break. There was a girl who lived not far from me who was a year younger, but we were fairly close friends. She was kind of a tomboy, outgoing, and generally pretty cool all around. I didn't have a whole lot of friends and was a bit of a loner, so the fact she would talk to me at all during lunch probably made her my closest friend. I admittedly was a bit interested in her romantically since she was cute, but I was too afraid to act on it since I didn't really have many friends and I didn't want to jeopardize anything. So during spring break, I'd come over to her house and we'd go out biking or walking. Basically, any adventure that came to mind we went on. I remember it was a Thursday, and I had come over as we had initially planned to bike up to this park that was in the foothills. This was in Southern California. Her mom answered the door and said she wasn't home right now. This was also before everyone had a cell phone, but invited me in. Again, not too out of the ordinary. Her mom was always pretty nice to me. Her mom was probably in her mid-40s and was very attractive. She looked like my friend, but with longer hair and more of a figure. Clearly, I was attracted to her, but never really thought much about it. We had talked before when I had come over, and she was always really nice to me, much nicer than her husband, who gave me the talk about hanging out with his daughter. Said talk included a not-so-veiled threat of serious physical harm if I did anything to her. This also added as to why I was kind of afraid to ask my friend out. Her mom invites me, and I kind of stand in the living room while she goes and gets me a glass of water. She then tells me that my friend isn't at home since she is with her dad. She then goes on how her and my friend's dad have gotten distant over the years. As we talk, she gets closer and closer, and before long, we kiss. It's a passionate kiss, and my hormones are going crazy at this point. Ultimately, we go to her room and have sex. It was my first time. I want to say it was hot and passionate, but looking back it was really awkward and clumsy. I had no idea what to do, and it didn't last long. She was less passionate and more aggressive. After she broke down and apologized, and I broke down and apologized too. It was not a good time. I just got dressed and walked home after we swore not to tell anyone. I didn't want to say anything because I was ashamed. Ultimately, my friend and I drifted apart. I think she knew something happened since I just stopped talking to her and kind of hid from her. Every time I saw her, I thought of what her mom and I did, and I felt shame and disgust. I'd duck into a classroom when I saw her, or I'd go eat lunch in the parking lot. I graduated and ended up dropping out of college twice, BS'd my way into a decent job and worked in Japan, Canada, and New Zealand for 10 years before coming back home, and honestly haven't had a meaningful relationship with a woman in a while. It's a weird mix of trust issues, I think, and just me being distant. I just think back to that time with my friend's mom and feel ashamed and regretful again. I should never have given in to my urges like that. However, I'm okay being by myself to a point, although I do kind of wish I had someone at times. It's strange. My friend and I talked a little on MySpace several years later. Yes, this is how long ago this was, but nothing after that. She went to college back east and was seeing someone. I felt jealous at the time, but then kind of sad. My last message was apologizing for becoming distant, but she never responded. We haven't spoken since about 2007. I have no idea what she's up to now. I know her parents eventually split up, and her dad was on a local city council until last year. No idea what her mom is doing now. I try not to think about it very much, but I wish I could just apologize to my friend. Story 8. I, 20s, worked with a guy 40s that got cancer. We work in a trade, paid by commission. To keep money coming in for bills during his treatment, his son, 20s, came in and started working under his dad's employee number so his dad would have some income. Bonding over work, football, booze, girls, and respect for his dad, he and I became pretty good friends. After his dad passed, he moved back to his hometown, 3 hours away, but we stayed in touch, and every other weekend I'd make the trip to his place and we drink and chill. He lived with his mom, 40s, whom was banging everything that had a penis, I'm assuming as a coping mechanism for losing her husband. She had made a few passes at me which I ignored out of respect for my friend and former coworker. Just shrugged it off, no big deal. One night we had a bigger drinking group than usual, like 8 people total. One of them knew the mom had made passes at me, so when we played Drunk Truth or Dare, I was of course dared to make out with the mom. This was repeated 3 times. I guess this group of friends got off watching us make out or something. Either way, end of night, everyone is passed out. I'm the last person standing. All the beds, couches, and recliners are spoken for other than next to the mom in her bed. I didn't feel like sleeping on the floor, so I jumped in bed with her to grab some sleep. Next thing I know, she's giving me head, and the rest is history. The friend didn't care I slept with his mom. In the years since, she's tried multiple times to make it happen again. But I don't let myself get that sloshed anyone, and as I rule, I now only pick truth while playing Truth or Dare with them. I don't regret or feel bad about it, just not something I'd ever want to repeat. Story 9. I got super drunk at the friend's mother's house. We all did really, but mainly me and the mum. But I'd come as my friend was going through a bit of a tough time, and it was supposed to be a nice surprise. My friend was going to her mum's for a nice night of merriment, and the mum told me I should come to cheer her up, which I agreed was a good idea. Everything started out fine, but as she and I got more drunk, we started kind of flirting, something that had actually happened before when we were both drunk. Then when it was time for everyone to go to bed, I snuck into her mum's room. My friend totally knew, a fact I wasn't aware of until a little while after, but her mum then had to drive me to the train station to go home the next day. What happened after is I, like a complete coward, never apologized, even after I found out my friend knew, and I lost that friend. They deleted me from social media and didn't speak to me for almost 2 years. We did recently reconcile. I sent a long text a couple of months back apologizing and letting my friend know how much I missed them. They then recently reached out because they found out I'm expecting my first baby. I'm very happy to be back in contact with this friend. Tip for everyone: don't sleep with your friend's parents. It's a dick move. But should that ever happen, and you want to keep this friend a friend, own up, apologize, and then give them space. The truth is always better than a lie, and your honesty and apology will be appreciated. Story 10. Met this guy at the beginning of college. Dated all through college. Anyways, my boyfriend at the time, the son, became super controlling, manipulative, and borderline abusive, which all came to a head when his parents' years-long divorce was finalized. Dumped the boyfriend, he moved out of state, and the dad still lived close by. Stayed in contact with the dad and many other people from his family. Eventually, the dad asked how my dating life was, and I took it as an opportunity to complain about how I was having a hard time finding people who I had sexual chemistry with. Turned into a conversation about kinks, and eventually, over a few months, the tension just kept building. To be blunt, we were both horny, lonely, and knew the other person was into the same things, so we started a friends with benefits type relationship. Helped that the dad was young and aged wonderfully. Eventually it ended, on good terms. We both met other people. We both pushed the other to date other people. Find something long-term and more fulfilling than cheap sex. From what I know, no one knows. I never told, and he didn't either. We were just lonely, needed some sex, and wasn't about to have casual sex with randoms. Might as well be someone you know that will be happy for you once you find the right relationship. Maybe I'll regret it in the future, but at the time it was amazing sex with a good-looking person I trusted.